The floor creaks under my sneakers as I slide between the stacks, and the sound splits the silence like a gunshot. I freeze. Wait. Nobody looks up because nobody else is here. Just rows of books breathing dust into amber light that filters through windows too tall for this building. My chest tightens. Even the air feels abandoned. I come here because anywhere is better than home. Because Mom's nursing scrubs are still crumpled on the couch where she left them yesterday morning, and the fridge hums empty, and the walls press closer every time I walk through the door. Here, at least, the silence has a reason. Libraries are supposed to be quiet. My fingers trail along spines as I walk. Leather, cloth, cracked plastic covers that stick slightly to my skin. I am not looking for anything specific, just something to fill the hours between now and when I have to go back to that apartment. The classics section smells like old paper and something sweeter, like vanilla left to rot. Then I see it. A red dot, tiny, perfectly circular, perched on the spine of a book wedged between two larger volumes like it does not want to be noticed. I stop walking. My hand hovers over the spine. The dot is so small I almost convince myself it is a trick of the light, but when I tilt my head it stays there, vibrant against the faded brown cloth. I pull the book free, Wuthering Heights. The cover is worn soft as skin, corners bent and split, pages swollen from years of hands that were not careful. The red dot gleams. I do not know why my pulse quickens. It is just a sticker. A mark left by some librarian decades ago to indicate something I will never understand. But my thumb rubs across it anyway, testing whether it will smudge. It does not. I flip the book open. The smell hits me first. Must and age and something faintly floral, like someone pressed dried flowers between the pages and forgot them. The title page is blank except for a checkout card glued to the inside cover, stamped with dates so faded they look like ghosts. 1973, 1981, 1996. No one has borrowed this book in years. I turn the page. The handwriting stops my breath. It is elegant, deliberate. Each letter slants just slightly to the right, loops curling with a care that feels impossible in the age of text messages and autocorrect. The ink is blue, faded but still legible, and the words sit centered on the blank page like they were always meant to be found. He promised to meet me at the fountain. He never came. My hands start to shake. I read it again and again. The sentence does not change. It just sits there, naked and raw, a wound sliced open on paper. There is no context, no explanation. Just a promise broken and the weight of someone's heartbreak pressed into ink that has survived longer than most marriages I know. I snap the book shut. My heart hammers against my ribs. I look left, then right, scanning the rows of shelves for cameras, for people, for whoever left this here. The library is still empty. Just me and the dust motes spinning lazy circles in the light. Who writes something like that in a library book? The question loops through my mind as I clutch Wuthering Heights to my chest. I should put it back. Reshelve it and walk away and pretend I never saw the red dot or the note or the ache that radiates off the page like heat. But my feet do not move, because whoever wrote that sentence knows what it feels like to wait for someone who does not come. And I know that feeling. I know it so well it lives in my throat. I open the book again, flip past the note, scan the margins for more writing, but the pages are clean except for yellowed age spots and a coffee stain shaped like a crescent moon. Nothing else. Just that one sentence, alone and unfinished. I close the book, tuck it under my arm. My legs carry me toward the circulation desk before my brain catches up. The elderly librarian sits behind the counter, white hair pinned in a bun so tight it must hurt. Her hands rest folded on the desk, fingers laced together like she has been waiting for me. Her eyes are pale gray, soft but sharp, the kind of eyes that see more than they should. I freeze 3 steps away. She smiles. It is a small smile, barely a curve of her lips, but it reaches her eyes and makes them crinkle at the corners. She does not ask if I need help. She just watches me with a patience that feels ancient, like she has all the time in the world and knows I do not. I swallow. The book feels heavier under my arm. "Can I check this out?" My voice cracks on the last word. She extends one hand, palm up, and I place Wuthering Heights on the desk between us. Her fingers brush the cover, tracing the spine where the red dot sits. She does not look surprised, does not ask why I chose this book or comment on its condition. She simply opens it to the checkout card and pauses. Her eyes flick to the note on the opposite page, linger there, then rise to meet mine. "An interesting choice," she says. Her voice is soft, textured like worn velvet. I do not know what to say. My throat closes around the questions piling up behind my teeth. Who wrote that? Why is it here? Do you know what it means? But before I can force any words out, she slides the book back toward me without stamping the card. "No need to check it out," she whispers. "Just bring it back when you are finished." Her eyes hold mine. There is something in them I cannot name. Recognition, maybe, or sadness, or both. I take the book. My fingers shake so badly I almost drop it. "Thank you," I manage. She nods once. Her smile does not change. As I turn to leave, I catch her reflection in the window. She is still watching me, hands folded again on the desk, head tilted just slightly like she is listening for something only she can hear. I push through the library doors into the late afternoon sun. The light blinds me for a second, and I blink hard, clutching the book to my chest like a shield. My phone buzzes in my pocket, a text from Mom, working double, leftovers in fridge. I do not bother responding. There are no leftovers. I walk 3 blocks before I stop under the awning of a closed bookstore and open Wuthering Heights again. The note stares back at me, unchanged. He promised to meet me at the fountain. He never came. My chest aches. I flip through the pages faster now, reckless, searching for something I missed. And there, tucked between chapters 16 and 17, I see it. Another sentence. Different ink, same handwriting. I waited until the stars disappeared. My breath catches. I turn more pages. Chapter 23. Another line. "No one ever knew I cried. My hands will not stop shaking. This is not random. This is not a prank. This is someone's story, fractured and hidden, waiting for decades in a book no one reads." I look up. The street is empty. The sun sinks lower, painting the buildings gold. I need to go back. I need to find more books. Because if there is one red dot, there might be others. There might be an entire story scattered across that library, spine by spine, waiting for someone to care enough to piece it together. I start running. I returned before the library opened. The autumn air bit through my jacket as I stood on the brick steps, watching my breath cloud and vanish. Through the tall windows, amber light filtered across empty aisles. My backpack hung heavy on one shoulder, Wuthering Heights inside with its fragments of someone else's pain pressed between yellowed pages. I had barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that elegant cursive looping across aged paper. He promised to meet me at the fountain. He never came. The lock clicked. The door swung inward. Elinor stood in the threshold, her silver hair twisted into the same neat bun, her cardigan buttoned to her throat. She studied my face for 3 heartbeats, then stepped aside without a word. I moved past her into the familiar smell of dust and old paper and something else I could not name. Longing, maybe. The kind that soaks into walls and waits. The fiction section stretched before me, hundreds of spines, thousands. I started at the far end, tilting my head to scan each shelf, searching for that tiny crimson mark that should not exist but did. 15 minutes passed. My neck ached. Nothing. I moved to poetry. My fingers trailed along cracked spines as I walked, feeling the texture of cloth covers and peeling labels. The floorboards creaked under my sneakers. Somewhere behind me, I heard the soft shuffle of Elinor's footsteps at the circulation desk, the whisper of papers being sorted. Then I saw it. A slim volume wedged between Yeats and Frost. The collected poems of Pablo Neruda. The red dot sat just above the bottom edge of the spine, no bigger than a pencil eraser, so faint I might have imagined it if I had not been looking. My hands shook as I pulled it free. The book fell open to a page marked by a slip of paper, folded once. I unfolded it with careful fingers, the same handwriting, the same ink faded to brown at the edges. August 9th, 1962. We danced until dawn at the pavilion by the river. He held me like I was something precious. My father would kill him if he knew. The date hit me like cold water. 63 years ago. Whoever wrote this had been young once, had danced, had hidden love from a father who would not understand. I pressed the note flat against the page, studying the shaky loops of each letter. The hand that wrote this had been steady once, but time had stolen that steadiness, leaving only determination behind. I needed more. The history section yielded nothing. Neither did biography. But in the alcove near the back, where afternoon light never quite reached, I found the second book tucked between volumes on World War II. A pocket-sized edition of Romeo and Juliet, its cover water stained and soft with age. The note inside was dated March 14th, 1963. His mother came to our house last night. She told my father that James was not good enough for me, that his family had nothing, that I deserved better. My father agreed. They forbade me to see him. I said yes to their faces and no in my heart. James. A name. Finally, a name. I stood there in the dim alcove, the book trembling in my grip, and felt something shift in my chest. This was not just scattered confessions. This was a story, deliberate and chronological, hidden across the library like breadcrumbs in a forest. Someone had marked these books, tucked these notes inside, and waited. But waited for what? For whom? I glanced toward the front desk. Elinor sat with her back to me, stamping due date cards with methodical precision. The sound echoed through the stacks. Thump, thump, thump. Her shoulders were narrow under the cardigan, her spine curved with age, but something about the set of her head told me she knew exactly where I stood and what I held in my hands. I slipped the note into my pocket and kept searching. The third book found me. I was reaching for a volume on the top shelf of the literature section, standing on my toes, when my sleeve caught the edge of something. A book tumbled free and hit the floor with a slap that made me flinch. I crouched to retrieve it, and there it was. The red dot, stark against the green cloth cover. The Age of Innocence by Edith Wharton. Of course. A story about duty and desire, about choosing the life expected over the life wanted. Whoever had marked this book understood subtext. I opened it. The note was shorter this time, the handwriting more uneven, as though written in haste or distress. November 2nd, 1964. I wore the white dress he loved. I met him at the fountain like I promised. I told him I could not marry him. I told him my family needed me to marry someone else, someone suitable. He did not cry. He just looked at me like I had died. Then he left. I have not seen him since. My throat closed. I read it again and again, trying to find some other meaning in the words, some way they could mean anything but what they meant. But there was no ambiguity. Only heartbreak, preserved like a pressed flower, still vivid after decades. I stood slowly, clutching all 3 books to my chest. The weight of them felt immense. Footsteps behind me, soft, deliberate. I turned. Alina stood 10 feet away, her hands folded at her waist. In the amber light filtering through the tall windows, her eyes were the color of smoke and storms. She did not smile. She did not speak. She simply watched me with an expression I could not read, something between sorrow and recognition, as though she were seeing not me but some ghost of herself. Our eyes locked. The air between us thickened with questions I did not know how to ask. Who are you? Who was James? Why did you leave these for someone to find? She tilted her head slightly, and the corner of her mouth lifted. Not quite a smile. An acknowledgement. Then she turned and walked back toward the front desk, her footsteps fading into the silence. I looked down at the books in my arms. 3 notes, 3 years. A love story told in fragments, scattered across genres and decades. But the last note was dated 1964. That was 61 years ago. How many more were there? I moved to the nearest shelf and began scanning spines again, frantic now, my eyes darting across every worn cover and cracked binding. And then I saw them. Not 1, not 2. 4 more red dots, scattered across different shelves, different sections, winking at me like small rubies in the dust. My pulse hammered in my ears. This was not a story. This was an archive, a museum of grief, curated by someone who needed the world to know what she had lost. And she had been waiting, all this time, for someone to care enough to look. I spread the notes across my bedroom floor that night, arranging them by date in the weak glow of my desk lamp. The paper felt thin as moth wings between my fingers. 4 slips. 4 fragments of a life I was only beginning to understand. October 1962. We danced until dawn at the pavilion by the lake. His hand at my waist was the only warmth I have ever known. June 1963. His mother forbade us to meet. She called me a distraction, said I would ruin his future, but we still find our corners. April 1964. I wore the white dress he loved. He said I looked like spring itself. August 1964. I told him at the fountain I cannot marry him. A timeline. A love story compressed into library books scattered across dusty shelves. Alina had hidden these on purpose, tucked them inside spines like pressed flowers, waiting for someone to notice the pattern. The red dots were not accidents. They were breadcrumbs. I did not sleep. My mind churned through every shelf I had not yet searched, every section I had skimmed too quickly. The library held 20,000 volumes. How many more dots were there? How many more pieces of Alina's past? The next afternoon, I went straight to the library after school without stopping at home. My stomach growled. I ignored it. Lunch had been forgettable anyway, a granola bar eaten while walking. Food could wait. The classics section yielded nothing new, so I moved to poetry. My fingers flew across spines, tilting my head to catch the light at the right angle. Students drifted past, headphones in, oblivious. The library was always quiet on Thursdays. Then I saw it. A faded green copy of Leaves of Grass wedged between Dickinson and Frost. Red dot at the base of the spine, barely visible against the cloth binding. I pulled it free. The note inside was folded smaller than the others, the handwriting tighter, more controlled. March 1963. We meet in secret now. He brings me pages torn from books he cannot afford to buy. I hide them under my mattress. My father would burn them if he knew. My pulse hammered. This was earlier than the August note. I was finding them out of order, a puzzle scattering itself backward through time. I needed more. I needed all of them. The biography section gave me nothing. Neither did history. But in the reference area, behind a row of outdated encyclopedias no one touched anymore, I found a slim volume on garden design. Red dot. The note inside was longer. July 1964. He asked me again. Showed me a bus ticket to California, 2 seats. He has been saving for 8 months. I told him I need time. But time is the one thing we do not have. My father has arranged a meeting with Richard Whitman next week, a banker's son. Suitable, safe, everything James is not. Richard Whitman, Aliner's married name. My chest tightened. She had chosen the banker, chosen safety over the boy who saved for bus tickets and tore pages from books he could not buy. I did not go home that night until the library closed. Mom was working a double shift anyway. The apartment would be empty, the fridge half bare, the silence thick enough to choke on. At least here I had purpose. Alina worked the circulation desk as always, stamping returns with steady hands. When I passed her to leave, she looked up. Her eyes were pale blue, soft as worn denim, and they held mine for 3 full seconds. Then she smiled. Faint, knowing she was watching me find her. I started skipping lunch entirely. The cafeteria felt like wasted time, 40 minutes I could spend searching. My stomach cramped by 6th period, but I chewed gum and drank water from the fountain and told myself it did not matter. This mattered. Aliner's story mattered. On Friday, I found 2 more books within an hour. A battered copy of Romeo and Juliet in the young adult section. A cookbook from 1978 in the nonfiction stacks, inexplicably marked. January 1963. He kissed me in the stacks where no one goes. I thought my heart would crack my ribs open. November 1962. He works at the mill. His hands are always scraped. I wrap them in my handkerchief when we meet. He laughs and calls me his lady. I am not a lady. I am a coward. The word coward struck me like a slap. Aliner's handwriting wavered there, the ink pressed darker, angrier. She had hated herself even then. I photographed every note with my phone, building a digital archive. At home, I taped printouts to my wall in chronological order, connecting them with red string like some obsessed detective. Mom came home at 2 in the morning and did not even glance into my room. I heard her scrubs hit the couch, heard the television murmur to life. She would be asleep in minutes. I was alone with Aliner's ghosts. By Monday, I had found 9 books. My hands shook when I pulled volumes from shelves, my vision narrowing to a tunnel focused only on spines. Red dot. No dot. Red dot. Teachers called on me in class and I could not remember the questions. My friend Shayla asked if I was okay. I said yes and did not look at her. I was not okay. I was consumed. Tuesday after school, I went straight to the library again, my backpack stuffed with textbooks I had not opened. Alina was reshelving returns near the mystery section, her movements slow and deliberate. When she saw me, she stopped, set down her cart, walked toward me with steps that barely whispered against the old wood floors. "You are searching very hard," she said. Her voice was soft, like pages turning. I swallowed. My throat was dry. "How many are there?" Alina tilted her head, studying me with an expression I could not name. Sadness, maybe, or recognition. "Enough," she said. Then she reached out and touched my wrist, her fingers paper thin and warm. "But you should eat, dear. Ghosts make poor companions on an empty stomach." She walked away before I could respond, leaving me standing between the stacks with my pulse roaring in my ears. She knew I was not eating. She knew I was unraveling, and she had not told me to stop. My throat closed. Alina's hand rested on the circulation desk, veined and steady, waiting. The fluorescent light hummed overhead. I could hear my own breathing. "You've been leaving them," I said, not a question. She tilted her head. The motion was slow, deliberate, like she was deciding how much truth to let through. Her eyes were gray and deep, the kind that had seen too much and remembered all of it. "Keep reading, dear." That was all. 3 words soft as dust. My chest tightened. "But I need to know. You will." She straightened a stack of returned books, her fingers brushing the spines with a familiarity that made my stomach ache. "If you're brave enough to finish what you started." The challenge hung between us. I thought about the notes I'd collected, the fragments of a life written in fading ink, the dances, the white dress, the choice that destroyed everything. I turned and walked back into the stacks. My hands shook as I scanned the shelves. The red dots had become a language I could read in my sleep. Fiction. 3rd row. A copy of 100 Years of Solitude, its spine cracked and peeling. The dot was there, barely visible against the faded cover. I pulled it down and flipped to the title page. The note was longer this time. The handwriting sharper, less wavering, like it had been written years ago when her hands were still young. June 1963. James wrote me letters I could not keep at home. My father read my diary once and burned it in the fireplace while I watched. So James hid them here, in the books I loved. We met in the philosophy section, where no one ever went. He would slip an envelope between the pages of Sartre or Camus, and I would find them during my volunteer shifts. We built a world in stolen words. The paper trembled in my grip. I read it again, then again. This wasn't some fictional romance scrawled by a lonely old woman. This was real. The letters had existed. James had existed. I pressed my palm against the shelf to steady myself. The wood was cool and solid, grounding. Around me, the library breathed with its familiar creaks and whispers, but now every book felt different. Every shelf was a hiding place. Every spine could hold a secret. I kept searching. 20 minutes later, I found another. This time in a collection of Pablo Neruda's poetry, tucked in the back corner of the literature section where the light barely reached. The dot glowed like a tiny ember. July 1963. We planned everything in those letters. James worked at the cannery and saved every paycheck. I told him about the places I wanted to see. California, the ocean, anywhere my father's voice could not reach. He bought a bus ticket. He showed it to me once, folded in his wallet, proof that he meant every word. We were going to leave on my 21st birthday. 3 more months, 92 days. I counted them like prayers. My vision blurred. I blinked hard and the words came back into focus. 92 days. I thought about my own calendar at home, the days I crossed off waiting for nothing in particular. Waiting for my mom to have a day off. Waiting for someone at school to notice I existed. Waiting for my life to feel like it meant something. Alina had counted days toward freedom, and then she'd let them slip away. I needed more. The next book found me. I don't know how else to describe it. I was walking toward the history section when my eyes snagged on a thin volume on the bottom shelf, almost hidden behind a stack of unshelved returns. The collected letters of Abigail Adams, red dot, faint but unmistakable. I crouched down and pulled it free. My knees pressed into the rough carpet. The note inside was folded twice, the creases deep and permanent. September 1963. James kissed me in the rain outside the library. His hands were cold, and his jacket smelled like salt water and tobacco. He said my name like it was the only word that mattered. He said we would be brave together. He said love was enough. I believed him. God help me, I believed him. The paper crinkled in my hand. I could see it. The rain, the jacket, the way his voice must have sounded saying her name. Alina. I sat back on my heels, the book heavy in my lap. The library felt smaller suddenly, like the walls were closing in, or maybe expanding. I couldn't tell anymore. This wasn't just a love story. It was a blueprint for courage I didn't know existed. 2 people building an escape route out of words and hope, hiding their future in the margins of philosophy and poetry. And I was the only one who knew. I stood and walked back to the circulation desk. Alina was checking in a stack of picture books, scanning each barcode with slow precision. She didn't look up when I approached, but her mouth twitched, almost a smile. His name was James, I said. She paused. The scanner hovered above a book about dinosaurs. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then she set the scanner down and met my eyes. Yes, one word, but the weight of it crushed my lungs. You hid his letters in the books. He hid them, she corrected quietly. I found them. That was our system. He would leave them, and I would collect them like treasures. Sometimes I would write back and leave my notes in books I knew he would check out. We built a library within a library, a place my father could never reach. Her voice cracked on the last word. She cleared her throat and picked up the scanner again, but her hands were shaking now. What happened? I whispered. She scanned another book. The beep echoed in the empty space between us. Keep reading, she said again, but this time it sounded like a plea. I walked out of the library into the cold afternoon air. The wind bit through my jacket, and my backpack felt heavier than it should. Inside were 3 new notes, 3 fragments of a life that had been real and desperate and doomed. I thought about James buying a bus ticket with cannery wages. I thought about Alina counting 92 days like prayers. I thought about what it meant to love someone enough to plan an escape and what it cost to stay behind. My phone buzzed. A text from my mom, working double, leftovers in fridge. I stared at the message. The words blurred. I shoved the phone back in my pocket and started walking. I didn't know where James and Alina's story ended yet, but I knew it didn't end with California. It didn't end with the ocean. It ended here, in this town, in this library, with an 82-year-old woman hiding her heartbreak in red dots and fading ink. And somehow, I was the one she'd chosen to find it. I stopped eating lunch at school. The cafeteria noise felt like static against the hum inside my skull, the one that whispered there were more books, more notes, more pieces of Alina and James scattered through these stacks like breadcrumbs leading to some inevitable ending I already knew would break me. 3 days after Alina told me to keep reading, I found the next red dot. Poetry section. Second shelf from the bottom. A collection by Pablo Neruda, spine cracked and cover soft as cloth from decades of hands. The dot was there, faint as a birthmark. My fingers shook as I pulled it free. The note was tucked between pages 67 and 68. The handwriting looked rushed, the letters slanting forward as if trying to outrun the words themselves. March 14th, 1965. James asked me to marry him last night. We were behind the cannery where the dock meets the river, and he got down on one knee in the mud and said, "Alina Jane Whitman, will you have me?" He had no ring, just his hands, rough and clean, holding mine. I said yes. I said yes until the word lost meaning. We kissed until my lips went numb. I wore his jacket home, and my father saw it smelled of fish and smoke. He knew. My throat tightened. I read it again. The yes repeating like an echo in an empty room. She said yes. I pressed the note against my chest, heart hammering against my ribs. For a moment, the story felt salvageable. Young love. A proposal. A life ahead. Maybe they made it. Maybe Alina was wrong when she said the escape never happened. Maybe James came back and they found a way, and this whole thing had a happy ending hidden somewhere in the final chapters. But the next book shattered that. I found it 20 minutes later. Fiction, third row, Jane Eyre. The irony was not lost on me. March 20th, 1965. My father locked me in my room for 2 days. My mother brought me tea and toast and would not meet my eyes. She said James was not suitable. She said his family had nothing. She said I had a duty to marry well, to secure our name, our future. I told her I loved him. She slapped me. I tasted blood on my tongue. She said love was a luxury women like us could not afford. The fluorescent lights above me buzzed. Someone coughed in the next aisle. The library went on existing around me, indifferent, while I stood there holding proof that Alina's mother had struck her for choosing wrong. I thought of my own mother, the way she never hit me but never touched me either. The way love in our apartment was a thing implied, never spoken, rationed out in late-night shifts and grocery money left on the counter. My hands were sweating. The paper stuck to my palms. I needed the next one. It took 40 minutes. I tore through shelves, scanning spines until my vision blurred. History, philosophy, gardening. And then, tucked in the travel section between guides to France and Greece, I found it. A battered copy of Dracula, red dot barely visible. The note inside was longer than the others, the handwriting neater, as if Alina had written it slowly, deliberately, carving each word into permanence. April 2nd, 1965. They gave me a choice that was not a choice. Marry Robert Whitman, a banker's son, a man 20 years older who smelled of cologne and cigars, or be disowned. My father said he would make sure James never worked in this town again. He said he would have him arrested for trespassing, for corrupting me, for anything he could invent. I believed him. I went to James one last time. I told him I could not go. I told him to take the bus ticket and leave without me. He cried. I had never seen a man cry before. He said he would wait. He said he would come back for me. I said no. I said forget me. I married Robert 6 weeks later in a white dress I hated. James left town the next day. I never saw him again. The book slipped from my hands, hit the floor with a thud that sounded like a door closing. She chose duty. She let him go. I sank down back against the shelves, knees pulled to my chest. My stomach was empty. I could not remember the last time I ate. The hunger felt appropriate. Everything felt hollow. Eleanor had said yes. She had loved him. And then she married someone else because her parents told her to. Because the world was small and cruel and gave girls like her no room to breathe. I thought of the 92 days they had counted down together. The letters hidden in books. The bus ticket James bought, all of it for nothing. The air in the library smelled like dust and old glue. My throat burned. I wanted to scream at her. At Eleanor, sitting somewhere in this building with her warm eyes and gentle smile, as if she had not destroyed the only good thing in her life. As if regret was enough. As if leaving notes in books for 60 years could somehow undo the choice she made when it mattered. But I also understood. The understanding crept in slowly, unwanted, like cold water seeping through a crack. I thought of every time I stayed silent at school. Every time I sat alone at lunch rather than risk rejection. Every time I swallowed my loneliness because speaking it aloud felt more terrifying than living with it. I thought of my mother working doubles and the way I never told her I needed her home. Eleanor had been 21. Scared, trapped, she made the safe choice. The one that kept her fed and sheltered and alive, and it had killed her anyway. I stood up. My legs felt weak. I left Dracula on the floor and walked toward the front desk where Eleanor sat, cataloging returned books with slow, careful hands. She looked up, saw my face. Her expression did not change, but something in her eyes dimmed like a light turned down low. She knew which note I had found. I opened my mouth, closed it. The words tangled in my chest, too big and sharp to force out. I wanted to ask her if it was worth it. If safety and duty and doing what her parents demanded had given her a single day of happiness. I wanted to ask her if she thought James forgave her, wherever he was now. But instead I heard myself whisper, "Did you love Robert?" Eleanor's hands stilled on the book in front of her. For a long time she said nothing. The clock on the wall ticked. A radiator hissed. Then, so quietly I almost missed it, she said, "No." The word hung in the air between us, heavy and final. I nodded, turned away, walked out of the library into the gray afternoon where the sky pressed down like a hand on my shoulders, and I realized with a clarity that made my chest ache that I was becoming her. Silent, safe, alone. The fluorescent lights hummed above Eleanor's desk. I stood there, fingers still gripping the edge of the counter where I'd confronted her moments before. The laminated wood felt sticky under my palms. Eleanor had admitted she never loved Robert, and now the silence stretched between us like the 60 years between her choice and this moment. I should have left, grabbed my backpack, walked out into the October cold where the air didn't taste like dust and regret. But my throat tightened. My chest ached with something that had been building for weeks, maybe years. The notes had cracked me open and everything inside wanted out. "My mom works nights," I said. The words came out flat. She's a nurse, double shifts, sometimes triple. She comes home at 2 in the morning, and I hear her keys scraping the lock because she's too tired to get it right on the first try. Eleanor's expression didn't change, but her eyes focused entirely on me. Not the polite librarian gaze I'd seen her give other patrons. Something sharper, hungrier. She leaves her scrubs on the couch, I continued. I wash them on Saturdays because if I don't, they pile up and the apartment smells like hospital disinfectant and other people's sickness. The library's heating system clanked. Someone coughed 3 aisles over. My dad left when I was 12. He sends a card at Christmas. Generic ones from the drugstore with snowmen on them. He signs his name but never writes anything else. Eleanor's hand moved across the desk, age-spotted and trembling slightly. She rested it palm up on the counter between us. An invitation, not a demand. I didn't take it, not yet. School is worse, I said. The pressure behind my eyes built. I sit in the back of every class. I eat lunch in the bathroom stall because the cafeteria noise makes my skin crawl. All those voices layered on top of each other like static. Teachers call on me, and I know the answer, but my voice comes out too quiet, and someone always says, "Speak up," and everyone turns to look. My fingernails dug into the counter edge. I'm invisible until I'm not, and both feel like drowning. Eleanor's lips parted. For a moment, I thought she'd offer sympathy, some empty phrase about things getting better or not being alone. The kind of thing guidance counselors said before checking their watches. Instead, she asked, "When did you last tell someone the truth?" The question hit like cold water. I opened my mouth, closed it. "Before today," she clarified, voice gentle but unyielding. "When did you last say what you actually felt to another human being?" I counted backward. Days became weeks, became months. My mother asked how school was, and I said fine. Teachers asked if I understood, and I nodded. The girl in my English class invited me to study, and I said I was busy. All lies, all silence. "I don't remember," I whispered. Eleanor's hand remained on the counter, steady despite the tremor. This time I took it. Her skin felt paper-thin over bird bones, but her grip surprised me with its strength. "That is why I leave the notes," she said. The heating system clanked again. Outside the tall windows, clouds covered the afternoon sun, dimming the amber light to gray. "I don't understand," I said, though something in my chest suggested I did. Eleanor leaned forward, and I caught the scent of chamomile and old paper that always clung to her cardigan. "For 50 years I have lived the consequences of my silence," she said. Each word emerged deliberate, weighted. I said yes when I meant no. I said goodbye when I meant stay. I let James leave believing I chose my father's money over his love, and I never told him the truth, that I was terrified, that I thought duty and safety were the same as happiness. Her eyes glistened, but no tears fell. "I have been the empty apartment, Maya, the mother too tired to ask questions, the invisible girl in the back row. I have been every kind of alone silence creates." My throat closed completely. The pressure behind my eyes broke, and I felt wetness on my cheeks, but I didn't wipe it away. "The notes," Eleanor continued, her grip tightening on my hand, "are not about James, not anymore. They are breadcrumbs for someone like you, someone who sees the world too clearly, who feels too much, who believes that staying quiet keeps them safe." She released my hand and reached beneath the circulation desk. When she straightened, she held a worn leather journal, its cover cracked and faded. My pulse kicked up. This wasn't a library book. "I have been watching you for 3 weeks," she said, and there was something almost apologetic in her tone. "Since the first day you found Wuthering Heights. The way you held that note, the way your hands shook. I knew you understood the cost of silence because you are paying it right now." She placed the journal on the counter between us. "There are more notes, Maya, many more. But the ones you need to find next are not about my past." She tapped the journal once. "They are about what happens when silence calcifies into a life you no longer recognize. When duty becomes a prison and safety becomes slow death." I stared at the journal. My reflection warped in the laminated countertop beneath it. "How do you know I need them?" The question came out barely audible. Eleanor's smile was sad and knowing and utterly certain. "Because 3 weeks ago, you walked into this library and headed straight for the darkest corner. You chose the table no one else wanted, where the light barely reaches. You pulled out homework you never looked at and sat there for 2 hours watching people who did not see you." My stomach dropped. "You have been coming here every day since, and you have never once spoken to anyone except me. You search for red dots like they are oxygen. You read my pain because it is easier than acknowledging your own." She pushed the journal closer. "I chose silence because I thought it was noble. You are choosing it because you think you are not worth hearing. Both of us are wrong, but your story still has time to change." The journal sat between us, a dark thing full of unknown words. The library hummed. Someone shelved books with rhythmic thuds in the biography section. Eleanor's voice dropped to barely a whisper. "The next notes will tell you what I did after James died, how I survived, how I learned too late that silence does not protect you from pain. It only guarantees you will face it alone." She stood slowly, joints creaking, and picked up the journal. For a moment, I thought she would hand it to me. Instead, she walked toward the back office, her footsteps slow and measured on the creaking floor. She paused at the doorway without turning around. "The red dots continue, Maya, but what you find next will hurt worse than a love story. It will show you what happens when silence wins." Then she disappeared into the shadows of the back office, taking the journal with her, leaving me standing at the desk with wet cheeks and a choice I was not ready to make. The journal smelled like attic dust and patience. I pressed my palms against its cracked leather cover, feeling the grain worn smooth in places where hands had gripped it over and over. Eleanor watched me from across the circulation desk, her fingers threaded together, waiting. I opened it. The first page stopped my breath. A list of titles filled the yellowed paper in that same elegant cursive I knew by heart now. Beside each title, a date. Jane Eyre, October 1976. The Great Gatsby, March 1981. 100 Years of Solitude, December 1993. The list continued for 3 pages. My eyes skipped down, catching years like stones dropped in water. 1965, 1972, 2004, 2015. "How long?" my voice cracked. Eleanor's expression didn't change. "Since Robert died." I flipped forward. More pages, more titles, more dates marching forward through decades. The handwriting evolved subtly, growing shakier in recent years, but never stopping, never giving up. 50 years, she said quietly. "I have been leaving them for 50 years. The library's heating system clicked on, rattling the old radiators. Somewhere in the stacks, a book fell with a muffled thump. I gripped the journal tighter, my thumbs smudging a margin note I couldn't quite read. Why? The question felt too small for what I was holding. Because I hoped. Eleanor moved around the desk, each step deliberate, her hand trailing along the wood for balance. I hoped someone would notice. Someone would care enough to follow the trail. She stopped beside me, close enough that I could smell the lavender soap she used. Someone would ask me why. I stared at the dates. 50 years of red dots hidden in plain sight. 50 years of notes tucked between pages, waiting. The weight of it pressed against my ribs. Did anyone ever? I couldn't finish. No, the word landed flat. You are the first. My throat tightened. 50 years. Half a century of silence, of marking books and reshelving them and watching patrons walk past without seeing. I thought of my own invisibility, my 3 weeks of searching, and how insignificant it seemed against Eleanor's 5 decades. What were you waiting for? I asked. Eleanor lowered herself onto the wooden stool behind the desk, moving with the careful slowness of someone who'd learned not to trust her own bones. For someone who understood that stories are not entertainment, they are evidence. She folded her hands in her lap. Evidence that we existed, that we felt something real. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Through the tall windows, amber light slanted across the worn carpet, catching dust motes suspended in air that smelled of old paper and floor polish. I turned another page in the journal. More books, more years. A life measured in hidden messages. The notes about James, I said carefully. About dancing and white dresses and running away. I met her eyes. What happened to him? Eleanor went very still. The silence stretched between us like a wire pulled taut. Outside, a car horn blared. A child laughed. Normal sounds from a normal world that felt suddenly very far away. You have not asked me that before, Eleanor said. I'm asking now. She looked down at her hands, at the age spots and prominent veins, at fingers that trembled slightly even when clasped together. I knew you would eventually. So tell me. Maya, my name sounded like a warning. Once I tell you, you cannot unknow it. I can't unknow any of this. I held up the journal. I can't unknow that you've been alone with this for 50 years. I can't unknow that I'm the only person who cared enough to look. My voice rose. So just tell me what happened to James. Eleanor's eyes filled. Not dramatically, not with sobs or gasping. Just a slow welling of tears that caught the amber light and made her look simultaneously ancient and heartbreakingly young. I chose my family, she said. I chose my father's approval and my mother's relief and the respectable marriage they arranged. I wore a cream dress, not the white one James loved, and I married Robert Whitman on a Saturday in June. She paused, swallowing. James left Riverside the next morning. I waited. My heart hammered against my sternum. He drove north. I do not know where he planned to go. Maybe he did not know either. Eleanor's hands tightened in her lap, knuckles going white. 3 months later, his mother knocked on my door. The radiator hissed. The heating system cycled off. The sudden quiet felt suffocating. There was an accident, Eleanor whispered. On a mountain road outside Portland. His car went off the edge in a rainstorm. She looked up at me, tears now sliding down the creases of her cheeks. He was 23 years old. The journal slipped from my fingers, hitting the desk with a dull slap. I never got to say sorry, Eleanor said. I never got to explain or beg forgiveness or tell him that I made a mistake. I just got a knock on my door and the news that he was gone. Her voice dropped to barely audible. And I have been carrying that for 60 years. My own eyes burned. I couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't do anything but stand there while the weight of her words settled over me like ash. Every Sunday, Alina continued, I visit his grave at Oakwood Cemetery. I bring flowers. I write letters I never send because there is no one to send them to. She wiped at her face with shaking fingers. And I mark the books. I leave the notes. I wait for someone to ask why. Alina. My voice broke on her name. Now you know, she said. Now you understand what silence costs, what it takes from you piece by piece until you are hollow. She stood slowly, gripping the desk edge. James is dead because I was too afraid to choose him, and I have been alive but not living ever since. The library felt too small suddenly, the walls pressing in. I thought of my own silence, my months of isolation, my careful invisibility. I thought of Alina spending 50 years hoping someone would notice her pain. I thought of James, 23 and heartbroken, driving north in the rain. I'm sorry, I whispered. Alina shook her head. Do not be sorry for me. Be sorry for everyone who stays silent when they should scream. Be sorry for every person who chooses safety over truth. She touched my hand, her skin paper thin and cold. Be sorry and then choose differently. The words hung in the air between us, a challenge and a plea and a confession all at once. Outside, the afternoon light was fading. The library would close soon. We would both go home to our separate silences. But something had shifted. Some truth had been named. Alina released my hand and turned toward the back office, moving with that careful fragility I'd never noticed before. At the doorway, she paused. There are 2 more marked books left, she said without looking back. When you find them, you will understand everything. Then she disappeared into the shadows, leaving me alone with a journal full of 50 years' worth of grief and the ghost of a man who died before I was born. I spent 3 days searching before I found the next red dot. My fingertips turned gray with dust. The library stacks stretched endlessly, row after row of spines that blurred together under the amber light filtering through the tall windows. I checked every shelf twice, pulling books forward to inspect their backs, tilting my head sideways to catch that tiny crimson mark Alina had been leaving for 50 years. She watched me from the circulation desk. Her hands shook more than usual when she stamped return cards. The tremor had spread to her shoulders, a visible fragility that made my chest tighten every time I glanced her way. On Thursday afternoon, I climbed the rickety ladder to the top shelf in the poetry section. My thighs burned. The wood creaked under my weight, and for a moment I thought about falling, about how easily a body could break. Then I saw it. A slim volume wedged between Dickinson and Frost. The red dot, barely visible, faded to rust. My hand trembled as I pulled it free. The selected poems of Pablo Neruda. The cover felt brittle, the binding cracked down the center like a broken spine. I didn't open it on the ladder. I carried it down carefully, cradling it against my ribs, and walked to the corner table where nobody ever sat. The vinyl chair exhaled dust when I dropped into it. The note was tucked inside the front cover, folded into a perfect square. I smoothed it flat against the scarred tabletop. Alina's handwriting was shakier here, the letters slanting hard to the right as if blown by wind. October 1965. Every Sunday morning I drive to Oakwood Cemetery. The gates are iron and cold. His grave is in the back corner under the oak tree. I bring flowers even though they wilt by Tuesday. I sit on the wet grass and tell him about my week. about the books I shelved, about the silence in my house. I write him letters I never send, apologies, confessions, the words I should have said when he was standing in front of me asking me to choose. Robert does not know. He thinks I visit my mother's grave. I have been married for 3 years. I have not been alive for 3 years. My throat closed. I pressed my palm flat against the paper as if I could absorb her pain through my skin. She had been 22 when James died. 22 and already locked into a life that wasn't hers. And she had kept going, waking up, driving to the cemetery, whispering to a headstone, returning home to a man she didn't love. For 60 years, I looked up. Alina was stacking returned books onto a cart, moving slowly, one hand braced against the desk for balance. How was she still standing? The question sat in my stomach like a stone. I folded the note carefully and slipped it into my jacket pocket with all the others. The paper collection was getting thick, a wad of grief pressed against my heart. I didn't find the second to last book that day, or the next. By Saturday, panic crept into my searching. What if I missed it? What if the book had been checked out, lost, thrown away during some budget purge? What if Alina died before I found them all? The thought arrived cold and sudden. I froze in the middle of the history aisle, a biography of Lincoln heavy in my hands. Alina wasn't just frail. She was 82. The tremor, the slow movements, the way she gripped furniture when she walked. How much time did she have left? I needed to find the last 2 books. But more than that, I needed to talk to her. On Sunday morning, I didn't go to the library. I went to her house. I had looked up her address in the phone book at the reference desk, my heart hammering as I traced my finger down the column of tiny print. Whitman, Alina, 42 Maple Street. The guilt of invading her privacy fought with the urgency clawing at my ribs. She needed to know someone was listening, that her 50-year message had been received. The cottage sat behind a white picket fence badly in need of paint. The yard was overgrown, weeds choking the flower beds. I pushed through the gate and climbed the 3 steps to the porch. The wood sagged under my sneakers. I knocked, waited, knocked again. The door opened slowly. Alina stood in the gap, smaller than she looked at the library. She wore a faded cardigan over a floral dress, her white hair unpinned and thin against her skull. Her eyes widened when she saw me. "Maya, I'm sorry," I said quickly. "I shouldn't just show up, but I needed to see you. I found another note, the one about the cemetery." Her face softened. She stepped back, pulling the door wider. "Come in, dear." The inside of the cottage smelled like chamomile tea and old paper. Books lined every wall, stacked on tables, piled in corners. Photographs crowded the mantel above a small fireplace. I recognized Alina in some of them, decades younger, her smile bright and hollow. She gestured to a worn couch draped with a crocheted blanket. "Sit, please." I sank into the cushions. They were softer than they looked, the fabric warm. Alina lowered herself into a rocking chair across from me, moving carefully, her joints stiff. "You went to his grave this morning," I said. It wasn't a question. She nodded. "Every Sunday for 60 years. Do you still write the letters?" "No." Her voice was barely a whisper. "I stopped 10 years ago. There was nothing left to say, only the same apology over and over." She folded her hands in her lap. "Regret is a loop, Maya. It plays the same scene endlessly, and you can never change the ending." I pulled the note from my pocket and held it out. "You were 22. You were scared. It wasn't your fault." "Wasn't it?" Her eyes glistened. I chose safety. I chose my family's approval. I let him leave believing I didn't love him enough. She paused, her breath rattling. That is fault. That is choice. The silence stretched between us, thick and heavy. There's one more book, I said finally. You said two remain. I found this one. Where's the last? Elinor's gaze drifted to the window, where weak November sunlight filtered through lace curtains. For a long moment, she didn't speak. Then she turned back to me, and something shifted in her expression. Resolution, finality. The last book, she said slowly, is not in the library. My stomach dropped. What? I placed it somewhere else. Somewhere I needed it to be found only by someone who cared enough to come here. To my home. To me. Her voice cracked. You are the first person in 50 years to ask why, Maya. You are the first person to see me. Tears blurred my vision. I blinked them back. Where is it? Elinor reached for a small wooden box on the side table. Her hands shook as she lifted the lid. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was a battered paperback with a red dot on the spine. She held it out. This is the last one. I stared at the book, at her trembling fingers, at the weight of 60 years sitting in her palm. I reached for it, but Elinor pulled back slightly. Not yet, she whispered. Read it at the cemetery, at his grave. That is where the story ends. The book weighs nothing in my backpack, but I feel it pressing against my spine with every step away from Elinor's cottage. The autumn air bites at my cheeks, sharper than it was an hour ago, and the sky has dimmed to the color of old bruises. I pull my jacket tighter and walk faster. Oakwood Cemetery is 3 miles from Elinor's house. I checked my phone before I left. No buses run this route on Sundays. I have to walk. My sneakers scuff against cracked sidewalk. The rhythm keeps me moving when my brain starts whispering that I should turn back, that this is private, that I am intruding on something sacred. But Elinor told me to go. She handed me the book with trembling fingers and said the story ends where it began. At James's grave. I pass houses with warm windows glowing gold, families eating dinner, laughter muffled behind glass. My stomach twists, though I cannot tell if it is hunger or nerves. The iron gates of Oakwood appear ahead, black against the fading light. They are open. They are always open, Elinor said once. As if the dead keep visiting ours, I slip through. The cemetery is older than the library, older than most buildings in this town. Moss creeps over headstones like slow water. Trees lean at angles that suggest surrender. The paths are gravel and they crunch beneath my feet loud enough to make me flinch. Everything else is silent. I do not know where James is buried. Elinor never said. She told me to find him. Another test, maybe. Or maybe she assumed I would know, the way I knew which books to search for, which notes to read next. But this is different. This is rows and rows of names I do not recognize, dates I cannot parse in the failing light. I pull out my phone and turn on the flashlight. The beam cuts through the dusk, illuminating surnames carved into granite. Morrison, Whitman, Fletcher, I freeze, Whitman, Elinor's married name. Robert Whitman, died 2008. I stare at his headstone for a long moment, trying to imagine Elinor standing here, placing flowers, mourning a man she never truly loved. But James is not here. I move deeper into the cemetery, past the newer graves with polished stones and plastic flowers, toward the older section where the ground dips and the markers tilt like crooked teeth. The air smells different here, Earth and rain and something faintly metallic. Then I see it. James Michael Callahan, 1942 to 1965. The stone is simple, small, no flourishes. Just his name and the years that contained him. I crouch in front of it, my knees sinking into damp grass, and set my backpack down. My hands shake as I unzip it. The book slides out easily. Love in the Time of Cholera. The cover is battered, the spine cracked and repaired with yellowed tape. The red dot on the spine is faded, almost invisible. I run my thumb over it. This is the last one. I open the book slowly, carefully, as if it might crumble in my hands. The pages are brittle, their edges browned with age. I flip through them, scanning for the note, and for a terrible moment I think it is not here, that Aliner made a mistake or that time has erased it. Then I see it, tucked between pages 212 and 213. A folded piece of paper, smaller than the others, the handwriting more deliberate. I unfold it with the reverence of someone diffusing a bomb. The ink is darker than the previous notes. Newer. This was not written 60 years ago, for whoever needs to know they are not alone. Love does not fade. Regret does not either, but connection heals both. Choose bravely. I read it twice. 3 times. The words blur and I realize I am crying. This note is not about James. It is not even about Aliner. It is about me. All those notes in all those books, scattered across the library like breadcrumbs, were not just Aliner unburdening her grief. They were a message in a bottle, cast out into the world in hope that someone, someday, would find them and understand. That loneliness does not have to be permanent. That silence is a choice, and so is connection. I press the note to my chest and let myself sob, ugly and loud, in front of a grave belonging to a man who died before I was born. The cold seeps through my jeans. My breath comes in ragged gasps, but something inside me is breaking open, and it does not feel like destruction. It feels like relief. I do not know how long I sit there, long enough for the sky to deepen to indigo, long enough for the streetlights beyond the cemetery gates to flicker on. When I finally stand, my legs are stiff and my face is sticky with tears. I fold the note carefully and tuck it back into the book. Then I place the book on James's grave, right at the base of the headstone. Aliner visits every Sunday. She will find it. But as I sling my backpack over my shoulder and turn to leave, something stops me. What if she does not come next Sunday? The thought arrives cold and certain. Aliner looked so frail tonight, her skin papery, her breath shallow. She gave me the book as if she was handing over something final, the way people do when they are preparing. I pull my phone from my pocket, no missed calls, no messages. I dial Aliner's number. It rings once, twice, 4 times, then voicemail. Her voice, thin and formal. You have reached Aliner Whitman. Please leave a message. I hang up and run. The porch steps creak under my weight. My knuckles slam against the cottage door 3 times, 4, the wood vibrating beneath my fist. Chamomile and dust seep through the doorframe, but no footsteps answer. No voice. Aliner. I twist the knob. Unlocked. The door swings inward with a groan that sounds too much like surrender. She sits in the armchair by the window, small as a child, her body folded into itself. Gray light spills across her lap where her hands rest, palms upward, fingers curled like dead leaves. Her eyes are open but unfocused, staring at something beyond the floral wallpaper, beyond the room entirely. My breath catches. Aliner. Her head turns slowly, recognition surfacing through layers of fog. Maya. The word emerges cracked, barely a whisper. You came back. I found it. I cross the room, my legs shaking, and kneel beside her chair. The book trembles in my hands. The last note, I found it. Her eyes brighten, wetness gathering at the corners. At his grave, yes. She exhales, a sound like wind through autumn branches. Read it to me. Please. I open the book, the spine cracking softly. Elinor's handwriting fills the inside cover, shakier than the earlier notes but still deliberate, still her. My throat tightens as I begin. For whoever needs to know they are not alone. Love does not fade. Regret does not either. But connection heals both. Choose bravely. The silence that follows pulses with everything unsaid for 60 years. Elinor's hand lifts from her lap, reaching toward me with aching slowness. I take it. Her skin is tissue paper, her bones fragile as bird wings beneath my palm. You found them all. Tears spilled down her cheeks, cutting paths through powder and age. Every single one. All 10, I whisper. She squeezes my hand with surprising strength. I started leaving notes the year after James died. Different books, different shelves. I thought if I scattered pieces of the story, someone might care enough to find them all. Someone who understood what it meant to be invisible. You saw me. From the first day you walked into the library. Her thumb traces circles on my wrist. You moved like a ghost, like you were afraid of taking up space. I recognized that walk. My vision blurs. I thought no one noticed. I spent 50 years being noticed by everyone and known by no one, Maya. After I chose duty, after I married a good man I did not love, I became exactly what my family wanted. Respectable, appropriate, empty. She pauses, breath rattling. I saw you drowning the way I drowned, but you are 16, you still have time. The words crack something open inside me. I don't know how to stop drowning. You already have. Elinor's other hand rises to cup my cheek. You followed the trail, you asked questions, you refused to let my story stay buried. That takes courage. It was just curiosity. Curiosity is courage. Her eyes hold mine, fierce despite their weariness. Do you know why I wrote that final note last week? My stomach drops. Last week, she nods. I have been ill for months. I knew time was running short. I wanted to make sure whoever found the notes understood they were not just about James. They were about connection. About refusing to let fear steal your voice. Elinor, listen to me. Her grip tightens. I cannot undo my choices. I cannot bring James back or reclaim those 60 years. But you can tell your story now while people are still alive to hear it. Your mother, your classmates, anyone who makes you feel less than whole. She leans forward, her forehead nearly touching mine. You found them all. Now you know my story. Tell yours before it is too late. The words land like stones in water, rippling outward. Tell yours, tell yours, tell yours. I think of Mom sleeping on the couch in her scrubs, too exhausted to notice me. I think of school hallways where I press myself against lockers to avoid contact, convinced my presence is an inconvenience. I think of every moment I swallowed words because speaking felt dangerous. I don't know where to start, I whisper. Elinor's smile is soft, sad, radiant. Start with the truth, write it down, say it out loud, however it needs to come. She releases my hand and gestures toward a small writing desk in the corner. There is paper in the drawer, a pen, stay here as long as you need. I turn toward the desk, then back to her. Will you be okay? I am more than okay, her voice steadies. For 50 years, I left pieces of myself in books, hoping someone would find them. You did. That is more than I ever imagined. I cross to the desk and pull open the drawer. Cream-colored paper. A fountain pen with midnight blue ink. I carry them back to the armchair and sit on the floor at Alina's feet, the paper balanced on my knees. My hand hovers over the blank page. Then I write. My name is Maya Tors. I am 16 years old. For as long as I can remember, I have been lonely. The pen moves faster. Words spill out, messy and raw and true. I write about Mom's absence, not from cruelty, but from exhaustion. I write about school, where I have perfected the art of invisibility. I write about the library, the red dots, the notes that made me feel seen for the first time. I write about Alina. When I finally look up, the light through the window has shifted to amber. Alina watches me, her expression peaceful. You are not alone anymore, she says quietly. I am not alone anymore. The words settle into my chest like an anchor, holding me steady. I fold the pages carefully and tuck them into my jacket pocket. Tomorrow, I will show Mom. I will find a way to speak the truth I have written. But today, I sit with Alina in the fading light, two people who were invisible now seeing each other clearly. Outside, the world continues. Inside, something new begins.